Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and can I begin this 2018 Spring Press Conference by welcoming all of you to the All England Club on this bright and sunny day at long last. And thank you all very much indeed for coming here today. I'm Philip Brooke, Chairman of the All England Club, and alongside me is Richard Lewis, our Chief Executive. And before we get started, two items of housekeeping to mention, please. First of all, at the end of the presentation and before question and answers, we will be handing out the press packs as usual. And secondly, after the conference, lunch will be in the competitors' lounge upstairs from this room. Now, 2018 is a very important year in the history of the All England Club as we celebrate our 150th anniversary. And we thought we'd start this conference at the beginning. It was on the 23rd of July in 1868, 150 years ago this year, 6 men visited the offices of Herbert Cox, publishers of The Field, and completed the formalities for the formation of the All England Croquet Club, Wimbledon. This was truly a defining moment in our 150 years. It was indeed how it all started. And you see on this slide the original club logo from back in 1868. Here are the minutes of that very first meeting back in July 1868. And it was 9 years later that there was a second defining moment in the club's history, when in 1877 the committee decided to hold a tennis tournament to raise £10 for the repair of the broken pony roller essential for the upkeep of the croquet lawns. That was the first Wimbledon Championships. Everybody knows that 22 players took part, and indeed the tournament was won by Spencer Gore. In 1922, the club moved to Church Road. Centre Court was built as the championships grew and outgrew Warple Road. And it's hard to believe that that is nearly 100 years ago now. And I thought we might just share with you a little bit more of our history and some then and now images contrasting the early days of Warple Road and Church Road with today. So here we see some of our croquet players back then at Warple Road, and indeed the image on the right taken last year in front of the clubhouse. And I'll leave it to you to decide which team would have won. An image here of the southern end of the grounds, the Church Road grounds, in 1922, and again last year, so 95 years on. Our ground staff then and now. And final image for you is just to show you the queue back then, and also an image from last year's championships, one of our long-standing traditions. So a little bit of history, but staying with history and this historic year, we thought this might be an interesting year to share with you the mission of the All England Club. The mission is very important to us. It is embedded in our Articles of Association, and indeed it guides our actions and keeps our focus on what we should be doing. Within the mission, A and B are all about maintaining the club and the championships at the pinnacle of our sport and guide us in the way we should go about it. C is about our wider role in tennis and is important and very relevant today given the significant integrity issues facing our sport. Which links nicely to today's agenda. We have 3 items on our agenda: protecting our sport, the Wimbledon Master Plan and the Championships 2018. Protecting our sport, linked to fostering the best interests of tennis. We're going to speak about the work of the IRP and give our reaction to the interim report that was published last week. And then we'll move on to talk about the Master Plan and the Championships 2018 and discuss improvements that we're making for this year's championships and into the future in order to maintain our position as the premier tennis tournament in the world in line with our mission. So let's move on to the first item on our agenda, protecting our sport. I'm going to make some opening remarks relating to the IRP process and our role as one of the 7 stakeholders. And then Richard is going to give our reaction to the IRP report and its key recommendations. So, firstly, we think it's important to remind us all of what happened in January 2016. Just before the start of the Australian Open, allegations were made in the media suggesting widespread match fixing by players at the upper level of world tennis, and that tennis authorities acted to cover up breaches of integrity. In response, tennis rejected these allegations, but given the seriousness of the issues raised, it was felt there was a need for independent scrutiny, and so tennis commissioned an independent review. Tennis also agreed to implement the recommendations of the independent review and to fund them in full. Extensive interviews took place, a mountain of evidence was collected, and submissions were invited. We at the All England Club made our submission in December 2016, and it is available to be read on our website. We also participated actively in the process along with the other 6 stakeholders over the past 2 years. Last week, the interim report was published, and I'd now like to hand to Richard to give our reactions to the report and its key recommendations.
Thank you, Philip. Good morning, everybody. Wimbledon, along with the other 6 stakeholders, have confirmed support for the findings of the IRP, and more importantly, the commitment to implement the recommendations. If you look at our submission, you will see that what we, Wimbledon, said in December 2016 has stood the test of time, and we are pleased with the direction the IRP has taken us for the future with regard to integrity. It is important to emphasise once again the IRP has not found any evidence of corruption or cover-up amongst the governing bodies. The IRP has, however, identified a serious issue at the lower levels of the game and suggested recommendations to address this. And just as we have been to date, we will play an active role alongside the other 6 stakeholders of tennis to consult on and implement the IRP's recommendations. Just to reiterate, Wimbledon is committed, working with our partners to seizing this opportunity that has been set out by the IRP. We wish to comment in particular on several areas of the IRP's recommendations. Of particular importance to us is repositioning the sports relationship with the betting industry through the removal of official data at the lower levels. This change goes to the heart of issues faced by tennis at lower levels, dealing with the issue at its source, rather than giving an ever-expanding TIU the impossible task of attempting to police the 60,000 plus matches. We also believe strongly in the need to redefine professional tennis. It has always been absurd to call thousands of tennis players professional. Professional tournaments should be defined as players being appropriately rewarded, not just with prize money, but also where appropriate, accommodation, travel allowance and things like that. Players then need to be educated or trained in their responsibilities and then accepting those responsibilities to the sport. They are professionals in a professional environment. Tournaments then need to be well run and regulated to appropriate standards, and by doing all those things you then create a safe betting market, and that is good for the betting industry and it is good for tennis. We support the call for more intervention from regulatory bodies. Criminalising corrupting of sport is something we would welcome from governments around the world. The role of the betting industry is significant, and the sport must unite and work to ensure that the betting industry plays its part. And comments from most of the betting industry over the last few days have been very encouraging indeed. And finally, an expanded, more independent approach to integrity is also appropriate and important. The RP's recommendations in this regard are far-reaching, but we agree with the principle of more independence. With that, I will hand you back to Philip.
Thank you very much, Richard. So now we're going to move away from protecting our sport and onto the Wimbledon master plan. And I'd like to start by giving you an update on the number 1 court project. So since last year, we've made significant progress with the project. The new fixed roof has been installed and is will be largely completed for this year's championships. The trusses that form the retractable roof have been constructed and will be installed this autumn. And we're on track for a 2019 completion on time and on budget for this very significant project. And this would be an appropriate time to thank our main contractor, Sir Robert McAlpine, who've been a superb partner on this complex and challenging project. During last winter, we used over 40 miles of scaffolding to help create the crash deck to facilitate work inside the bowl on the building of the new fixed roof. And since this time last year, we've added 2,300 tonnes of steel and over 130 kilometres of cabling to this project, with an average workforce of around 700 on site each day. This is an image of what has fondly become known as our truss farm. What you see here are 9 trusses on the ground. They've been constructed on site. They are now ready to be lifted after the championships. There are indeed 2 more trusses still to be built. There just physically wasn't enough room to fit 11 trusses in the available space. Each truss is 70 metres long, 7 metres high, and they weigh 100 tonnes each. So immediately following the championships, Europe's largest crane will arrive to lift the trusses onto the fixed roof. And here it is, limbering up, getting ready for action this autumn. The crane itself takes 3.5 weeks to build, and the operator will be lifting the trusses into place blind. Quite a challenge, I think. Anyway, here's a short film to bring the first 2 years of this project to life and to show you what the finished article will look like. Okay, thank you very much for that. And finally, on the subject of number 1 court, we are pleased to announce that on the 19th of May 2019, we will celebrate the new number 1 court with the hosting of a special afternoon of tennis to test the roof and to receive our safety certificate. The proceeds of the event will be donated to the Wimbledon Foundation. More details will be forthcoming later in the year, but we wanted to give you the date for your diaries. Think royal wedding date, just add a year. Now let me move on to other master plan projects. In the meantime, as well as the number 1 court project, we have been getting on with several other significant projects linked to our master plan. Firstly, the museum building. We are adding an additional story to this building in response to growing staff numbers. This project will commence after this year's championships and will be completed for the 2019 championships. The Somerset Road project, we've mentioned at conferences like this in the past. We have planning approval for this project. We will commence it, all being well, after the 2019 championships and complete it in time for the 2022 championships. And to remind everybody, it calls for the construction of a significant underground car park, 6 new indoor tennis courts and 6 new outdoor clay courts. It will also be the new transport hub for the championships, as well as a new secure player drop-off area. At Rains Park, we are busy working with a project seeking planning approval for the All England Club Community Sports Ground to expand its activities, and we're looking to add additional grass courts, hard courts and an additional indoor bubble. And finally, on this slide, the Millennium Building. This building that we're in today is approaching 20 years old, and we're starting to examine in some detail how to modernise the building and to improve the experience for all of its users. And finally, on the wider question of Wimbledon Master Plan, thought it would be appropriate to say a few words about Wimbledon Park Golf Club. As widely reported, I can confirm that we have made an offer to the golf club for the early surrender of the lease. That offer is now being considered by the board of Wimbledon Park Golf Club. And just so everybody understands the area of land we're referring to, it is the area highlighted in the image in green. Why have we made the offer now? Given all that we are doing elsewhere with our master plan, we are at an important stage in our planning cycle, and the reason for making the approach now is that we are seeking clarity one way or another with regard to the early surrender of the lease. What would we do with the land? I think many of you know this, but bringing Wimbledon qualifying on site is something of a priority for us. We are the only Grand Slam that doesn't have its qualifying event on site, and certainly a medium-term ambition would be to do that. We do think that with the year-round use of the land, we can improve the arrival experience for spectators coming to Wimbledon. We would look to seek ways of working with the local community, and we also recognise that this is an historic park and the role of Capability Brown in its original development, and we would be keen to respect all of that were the lease to be surrendered early. Just to say finally on this issue, we are in negotiation with Wimbledon Park Golf Club, and we won't be making any further comment on it here today. And now I'm going to hand over to Richard, who's going to speak about this year's championships.
Thank you. So, returning to the theme of fostering the best interests of tennis. As announced by the Grand Slam board in November, we are pleased to remind you of 3 new Grand Slam rules at this year's championships. In the wake of last year's first round withdrawals, we pledged to act on it, and we have done so. We were very influential in the creation and adoption of the 50-50 rule, and hope that the introduction of it will play a significant role in mitigating the problems of first round singles retirements. The rule means that players on site who are injured or sick can withdraw before their first round match and still receive 50% of the first round prize money. Crucially, however, if they opt to play the match, they are vulnerable to a fine of up to 100% of their first round prize money if we believe they should not have played the match. We are fully supportive of the so-called 151 rule and have lobbied for this type of rule to be introduced for a few years now. We believe that the time between between matches and before matches start takes too long, unless it is a deliberate gap in the order of play, such as not before start time. For any who might be wondering what 151 refers to, it's 1 minute after walking on court before the meeting with the umpire, 5 minutes warming up, and then underway within another minute. And yes, I can assure you that will speed things up. Thirdly, we're extending the time between points from 20 to 25 seconds. Again, this is in line with other Grand Slams. Other Grand Slams have experimented with the shot clock as a mechanism for enforcing this rule. We're adopting a wait-and-see approach. Does it speed things up? Does it speed up the time between points, or have the opposite effect and players play to the clock? Will umpires enforce the rule consistently and effectively? For example, when there is a huge crowd in a very long match. Does it help or hinder? We are happy to wait and see. Finally, we wish to take the opportunity to make comment on the trials to allow coaching that are taking place elsewhere in tennis. This seems like the right time to comment. We totally disagree that coaching should be allowed, and feel very strongly indeed that coaching in tournament play is wrong. It is a fundamental matter of philosophy for Wimbledon that tennis is a gladiatorial sport. In singles, you're on your own, you work things out for yourself, and similarly, of course, in doubles. We have much more empathy with the view that match officials, and indeed tournaments, should be tougher on enforcing the rules that do not allow coaching. Going on to other championship matters, we recognise that sustainability is an important and necessary area of focus, particularly for major events. We have put in place a sustainability vision, which is to sustain the running of the club and the championships in a way that minimises the impact on our environment. This will take some time, and we recognise there is a huge amount to do, but we are pleased to be implementing several changes for 2018. There will be no plastic straws in use at the championships, and there were over 400,000 used last year. There will be 87 water refill points, and this is nearly doubled since 2014, and 21 water fountains available for use by the public. This demonstrates we are not new to the issue of sustainability in this area, and we have been making year-on-year improvements. Jaguar, our official car, will provide 10 electric vehicles for our courtesy car fleet for the first time. We will continue to monitor our waste streams effectively and actively. In 2017, only 1.4% of waste went to landfill. But this is only the beginning of our sustainability roadmap. More to do, for example, in ensuring plastic, if it is used, is recyclable. But I hope our announcement today illustrates that it is very much on our agenda, as it is indeed within British society. We have once again made considerable improvements to our guest experience, and I'd like to highlight a few for you. Inevitably, we start with security, which remains of the utmost importance. Once again, we are taking the advice of the Metropolitan Police and other relevant agencies regarding our security operations, and will ensure that we have appropriate and very strong measures in place. We continue to ask all of our spectators, as well as our media, to remain vigilant at all times. With the queue, we have two significant additions for our spectators in the queue: the provision of public Wi-Fi for the first time, and the introduction of card and contactless payment at the turnstiles, and we will be encouraging spectators to use contactless payments. With the advent of the new #1 court roof comes a new big screen, which at 18 metres by 6 metres is double the width of the previous screen. We've completed the work transforming the old Court 19 into a new public plaza, the walled garden, which will provide a beautiful new outdoor seating area. And finally, for our centre court debenture holders, we have completed a significant refurbishment to the courtside restaurant. In terms of covering the championships, 2018 marks a significant year for us, with the introduction of Wimbledon broadcast services, as we assume responsibility for host broadcast. We are delighted that this includes with it several innovations for 2018. We will broadcast all 18 courts for the first time. We'll introduce Netcam on centre court and #1 court, and we will broadcast centre court in 4K, and we will continue to broadcast one court from qualifying. We've also been busy rebuilding and redesigning Wimbledon.com, which will now feature the ability to favourite players and receive alerts on their progress, and are proud to be introducing My Wimbledon, a personalised digital experience for our fans. Lastly, for our media, who play such an important role in covering the championships, we have enhanced our media website, adding the ability to view the media conference and other interview schedules online. Referring to all three parts of our mission statement, we have made significant steps in supporting our communities locally, nationally and internationally. The Road to Wimbledon, our 14 under junior tournament, has this year expanded to Japan. The winners of the Japanese, Indian and 3 Chinese events, including Hong Kong, will join Britain's best 14 under juniors here at the All England Club in August. And we thank Paul Hutchins for all his hard work on this important series of events, not just this year, but for well over a decade now. The All England Club Community Sports Ground in Rains Park opened for community pay and play last autumn, and we are delighted that over 500 people from the local community have registered to date. The Wimbledon shop will have a presence in Wimbledon Village for the first time with a pop-up shop from late May through to the end of July. This has already been welcomed by the local business community. And lastly, we are very proud to reflect that the Wimbledon Foundation, the charity of the All England Club and the Championships, has begun a 3-year partnership with WaterAid. And because videos speak louder than words, here's a very short video to explain why. So finally, on the subject of players, we have a few important things to mention. Firstly, we are very proud to be staging a quad wheelchair tennis exhibition event for the first time. We have made significant and important changes to 4 of our 6 dressing rooms. Previously called North and South, they are being renamed Championships dressing rooms and being completely refurbished to a very high standard of finish, plus reconfigured to make efficient use of space. The remaining 2 dressing rooms, the members, the ones used by seeded and some other players, will be refurbished in time for the Championships in 2019. We are pleased to announce that the ladies singles qualifying draw will extend to 128 players from 2019. The obvious question is, why not this year? And the answer is that the disparity of the draws was brought into sharp focus in Australia this year, and we needed a longer lead-in time to implement changes for Roehampton. It is possible, although not finally decided, that we will no longer have doubles qualifying events at Roehampton. And if that happens, players deserve a very long notice period if that is to be the case. And lastly, you'll be aware that former Davis Cup player and British number 2 Jamie Baker will be joining us in a few days' time in the new role of Head of Tennis Relations, an important addition to our team. Jamie will play a crucial role in the future in the way we communicate and interact with players and help inform our decision making moving forwards. Staying with the topic of players, I will hand you back to Philip to talk about prize money.
Thank you very much, Richard. So now to the subject of prize money for the Championships 2018. Total prize money this year will be £34 million, a healthy increase of 7.6% on 2017. Men's and ladies singles champions will each receive £2.25 million. That is an increase of £50,000 on last year, or 2.3%. And singles prize money for qualifying and for competitors in the first to the fourth rounds will increase by more than 10%. Put another way, there will be a double-digit percentage increase for every singles player competing at the championships, other than for the 8 who reach the quarterfinals or better. Clear demonstration of our continued commitment to do what we can for players who need our help the most. And to reinforce the point, back in 2011, first round singles prize money at Wimbledon was £11,500. This year it is £39,000. Doubles and mixed doubles will both have increases overall of around 10%, and there is a 20% increase in prize money for our wheelchair events. There is a full breakdown of our prize money announcement in the press packs, which will be handed out to you shortly. And now, if I can, I'd like to just go back to where we started, really, anniversaries. This is a very important year for our club, 150th anniversary, but there are also some other anniversaries that I would like to mention here today. Firstly, it is the 50th championship for the Duke of Kent as our president, and this will be an appropriate time to record our thanks to him for all that he has done for our club and for the championships over this very extensive period of time. It's also 50 years since open tennis began, back in 1968, and I'm delighted to announce that Rod Laver and Billie Jean King, our 1968 singles champions, will attend this year's championships as chairman's special guests. And finally, to note that it is also the 125th ladies singles championship this year. Now, before we close this conference, we wanted just to share one other thing with you. So we've spoken about cranes and we've spoken about planes, and now it's the turn of rockets. So at last year's championships, this may seem a little off message, but at last year's championships, International Space Station astronaut Tim Peake was one of our guests. And accompanying Tim was US NASA astronaut Drew Firstel, who is currently commanding a similar mission to Tim's. Drew's mission is Mission 56, and he's currently on the International Space Station. And here is an image of Mission 56, Drew's mission, taking off from Kazakhstan last month. And why is this relevant to all of us? Well, there is some relevance in that on board the mission there are 2 very special Wimbledon coins. And here is an image. This was taken, emailed to us yesterday from space. This is pretty cool stuff, isn't it? It was emailed to us by Drew, and it shows him in the International Space Station, the two special coins floating. You can see them in the middle of the image there, floating in space with Earth in the background. And these 2 coins have been commissioned by us with the help from Drew, and each coin depicts the championship's logo on one side of the coin and with the logo of Mission 56 on the other side of the coin. Around the rim of the coin, around one of the rims, it reads coin toss for the ladies singles final 2019, and around the other coin toss for the men's singles final 2019. At this moment in time, Drew and the coins, we are authoritatively informed by Drew that they are directly above Melbourne, Australia. And so, all being well, having travelled 55 million miles, we look forward to welcoming Drew and the coins back to Earth this autumn, in time for the coins to be used for the coin toss in the ladies and men's singles finals in 2019. Extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. Not unlike top tennis players here at the championships. I hope you like the story, and with that we'll hand out the press packs, ladies and gentlemen, and then be happy to take questions from the floor. Okay, everybody good to go? So we'll take the first question, please. Go ahead, Chris.
Can I go back to the IRP report, in particular your comment that it's absurd that several thousand people call themselves professional tennis players. What would you say is the definition of what you consider professional? Is Wimbledon taking any active steps towards encouraging the enactment of your vision of what it actually means to be a professional player, particularly at the lower reaches?
Yes, the answer to that is, and I think we have been for a number of years. We've talked about the earlier rounds of the championships. We doubled the prize money in challenger events last year, and behind the scenes we've been, I'll use the word lobbying, the fact that if players are not earning sufficient prize money to cover their expenses, if they are not of a sufficient standard to be likely to cover their expenses, if the tournaments aren't of a sufficient standard and profile to be able to pay any prize money that could possibly move them towards being professional, then we think that's entirely wrong. So I think we have been doing quite a bit on that path for several years.
Go ahead, David.
If I may, two quick questions. First of all, has the completion of the fixed point for court number 1 enabled you to increase the capacity for spectators this year? And secondly, to save us looking it up, if the golf club doesn't agree to this release, when does the lease actually expire?
Okay, so the lease expires in 2041 is the answer to that question, and there will be increased capacity in number 1 court, but not this year. So we'll be increasing the capacity when we remove the seats after this year's championships. All the seats come out, they're replaced with new, wider padded seats, as we did with centre court. So we'll lose some capacity because of that, but we'll gain capacity because we've added 2 rows to the back of the stadium. The net effect is to add about 1,000 seats from 2019. Go ahead.
One of the recommendations in the IRP to do with the sale of the live data being scrapped is that the money that the ITF loses is going to be strictly compensated by the other stakeholders. Is that something Wimbledon will commit to?
So I think it's fair to say that we were a leader in making this suggestion. We recognise that the ITF has an important role in our sport for the development of tennis, particularly junior tennis, and indeed they play an important role in senior tennis as well. But they have an important role in development of tennis around the world, and we recognise that there will be a loss of income when this change comes about, and therefore tennis needs to do something about it. And we think it's important that the sport comes together and everybody plays a part in doing so. Mike?
What is your view, Philip, on the current discussions about the future of the Davis Cup? Does Wimbledon have a position that, I mean, I think it's the LTA that kind of casts the vote.
They do.
Have you made your feelings known to the LTA, and what are those feelings?
I think our feelings are that it is It's a very historic tournament. It's been around for over 100 years, and there have been very many memorable matches over that period of time, and it would be a great shame, I think, for our sport, for the Davis Cup not to have a strong future. And the question for today is, how do you secure a strong future for that event? What we've seen in recent years is that as tennis has changed and the demands on professional players have grown, so it is somewhat inconsistent with potentially playing 4 times a year, giving up 4 weeks, having to travel halfway around the world to play on a different surface, etc. So tennis needs to do something to modernise the Davis Cup in order to give it a bright and healthy future. And we wouldn't claim to have the precise answer to that in terms of what it is, but I think we would be one of the first in line to say that the sport needs to step up and do something about it. Russell?
How many players do you consider should be considered professional? And would you agree with the IRP suggestion that the $15,000 and $25,000 events on the future circuit should not be deemed professional? Would you go even further than that?
Do you want to go first?
I'll start. We would agree with the IRP suggestion, and I think the discussions that have been had around the ITF proposals for a transition tour and that sort of thing, what the IRP have said and our view in our submission in 2016, they're not a million miles apart. We would be slightly more hawkish. We would probably say that the cut-off should be higher, around the challenger level, around maybe 500, but I don't think there's a huge difference between the 500 to 750 ranking that the IRP has sort of landed upon. I think the fundamental point is removing the live data stream below that level. That's a crucial issue that has to happen, and where you draw the line between professional and non-professional tennis, I think, is in that area, but it's relatively marginal.
Paul?
There was a lot of talk at the start of the year, players unhappy about the proportion of revenues at Grand Slam tournaments that went back in prize money. I wonder, have you had since then discussions with players, and did those discussions have an input into your decision this year on prize money?
So we've had no discussions with any players about that issue, and our decisions today about prize money are our decisions. We're proud of our record on prize money. I could give you lots of stats, but I won't. You can look them up, but I think we have a very strong record. But I would also say that players coming to Wimbledon, we do focus a lot on prize money, and actually we think there's also a focus about why do players come here. They come here because they see it as being a place they want to play. It is. I never played here. I would have loved to have played Wimbledon. Richard had the privilege of playing here many times, but I think for aspiring tennis players, yes, the money is important, but actually what's more important is that we keep our tournament in its place at the pinnacle of the sport, and we give players coming here a world-class experience. That world-class experience costs a lot of money, and all the time we are balancing the demands of today's players in terms of more prize money, yet recognising that tomorrow's players also need to be looked after, and the way to do that is through future investment. So today's players are enjoying this environment, and this environment has been created through reinvestment of money from prior years. So we're always walking that fine line.
Why are you content with our wait-and-see approach to the shot clock and the other 3 slams have all adopted some form?
It's like I said in the presentation, really, we're not totally convinced yet. The rule is there. The rule is there to be enforced by the umpires, and from time to time they do. The visibility aspect, as I said in the presentation, could be counterproductive. We're interested to see how it works in the bigger matches. The other Grand Slams haven't introduced it yet to the main draw. So from our point of view, we're very content with wait and see. We're not saying it won't work. We're not saying it's irrelevant. We know there's been some feedback from some players saying that they like it. But equally, some players have also said that they're tempted to slow down. because they look at the clock and they realise they've got more time. So let's wait and see. And it's relatively easy to implement, but it's not a rule change. It's just a visible thing on court that helps possibly maybe the umpires. I
would just add, in terms of, is this an issue that needs a shot clock to help solve it? I think men's tennis has largely solved the issue for itself. I think if you watch the game now, players are very conscious of the time between points, and they are pretty much there. They're ready to go for the next point within the 25 seconds. So I think, to add to Richard's answer, is there a need now to do something? We're not sure.
Does that suggest that you think women's tennis isn't?
No, sorry, I was picking men's tennis in the sense that I think we all know there have been some men's tennis players who have been historically quite slow. Go on, Simon.
On wild cards for main draw or indeed qualifying, would Dan Evans be treated as any other British player, or would there be special consideration given to him regarding a return from a doping ban?
So I think you all know our process here, but we have our wildcard meeting on the 19th of June, and at that meeting we will, if Dan Evans applies for a wildcard, it will be considered at that meeting along with any other applications for wildcards.
Can I just ask a follow-up from that? Do you have any involvement, the LTA hold a Wimbledon qualifying wildcard playoff? It's even possible that he may require a wildcard to enter that. Are the club involved in any discussions in wildcards for that, or do you leave that to the LTA?
It's actually it's a British qualifying wildcard event, and we do have some involvement in it.
And selecting
yes.
wildcards for that?
Yes.
Just on the subject of dead time and whatever, how concerned are you about the consistent rise of the toilet break? Richard, when you were playing, this was pretty much unheard of, I think I'm right in saying.
I think it was unheard of.
Now players occasionally even go for a loo break even before the match has started. Also, the physio, the amount of times this causes obviously a huge break in play, much longer delays actually than perhaps a few seconds between points. I'm just wondering if you are sort of monitoring that. Clearly TV particularly does not like it.
I think it's a great question. I think it is a concern. It's not so easy to deal with. We certainly have had some discussions with people on the medical side to see whether there can be a tightening up of this issue, because you're absolutely right. I don't think it's just TV. I think it's spectators, everybody, opponents. It can be an issue, and the words gamesmanship comes in, doesn't it? So the problem is that the medical profession will tell you if a player says they're injured, they need treatment, and if you don't give them treatment, you're into legal vulnerabilities. Toilet breaks is slightly more difficult to monitor, but yeah, I like the good old days, and why not do away with them, or maybe allow one a match, something like that. We would certainly support something along those lines.
You wouldn't do it yourselves, unilaterally?
We steer clear of trying not to end up in a unilateral situation, because that's relatively difficult for the players. It's best avoided if possible.
Chris?
Still on time, in particular the 151 rule. You say, Phil, that the problem's largely been solved, but we know that there are a couple of players who have used their reputations to slightly, it's been the impression they might be intimidating some umpires. And will you give umpires complete and utter backing in enforcing that, even if it's enforcing it against some very, very highly renowned historical names?
The answer has to be yes, doesn't it? You can't have a rule and then say by exception it's okay for you to be treated differently.
And do you have the scope to do that, or is it primarily run by the officiating fraternity?
Well, it's run by the officiating fraternity, but they will be given guidance from us in terms of what we expect to happen.
I think the important thing is the match officials, because it's during a match, isn't it? So you can't interfere with what's going on during a match. The important thing is the match officials will get the support year round if they implement and apply the rules appropriately. That's what the match officials need. And from a Wimbledon point of view, they'll certainly get
But
that.
with respect, it's slightly different in a tour event where a big name may be actually very bit much part of the marketing strategy than it is at a slam where, you know, the big names are less important. They're still obviously part
But that's the point. It's a year-round issue. The match officials need to know that they will be supported at every event, not just Grand Slams.
My understanding of the rules is that there's no mechanism for someone like Andy Murray to be put into the seeds in the men's draw, but there is discretion for you to put someone, to put, say, Serena Williams, the seed, into the ladies' singles, having missed time with her pregnancy. I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
So our understanding is that if a player is outside of the top 32 in terms of the ranking, that they would not be seeded at Wimbledon. You've just got me slightly wondering about Serena, so please don't quote me therefore as that being absolutely our position, but that would be my understanding.
But Serena, I think Serena herself has made public her own thoughts that it is unfair to penalise a female player in that way. It being obviously much different from an injury.
It is totally different from an injury. I think we have empathy and sympathy with the point being made. I think it's a question of whether she would have a protected ranking or not. And
She wouldn't be seeded on the protected ranking. I think the key point is we have agreements with the ATP and the WTA to follow a formula, and we will abide by those formulas.
But your ladies seeding formula, well, you don't have a formula.
We don't have a formula, no.
It's, in the opinion of the committee, a change may be necessary to produce a balanced draw.
But that is
Doesn't
within
seem to
that
have
is
the strict top 32 thing that you have in the men's side. So surely there is the option there to bump up to
Yeah.
into the.
it's a good detailed question that we will for sure address at our meeting.
Within the top
Don't know
32.
now.
Within the top 32, there's discretion.
That would have been my understanding, but
According to the ladies seating on your website, it says, I mean, there's reference to the top 32 in the men's side, but not in the women's side.
I think the reason that there's reference to the top 32 in the men is that there needs to be a reference point, so you can then you know which 32 you're adjusting for the surface-based seeding. For the ladies, we don't have that issue, so maybe those words are didn't refer to the 32 because they didn't need to in the same way as for men.
So you're not sure now if Serena can be bumped up or not?
I think I've just said we need to just double check that point. That seems to have silenced the room.
Got a couple of months before the meeting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Different subject. Have you given consideration to playing wheelchair finals on the main show courts?
Well, do you want to go or shall I go?
Well, you go, it's fine. Yeah.
So it's a very good question, and wheelchair tennis at Wimbledon we take very seriously, and specifically on that point, last year we did in fact hold our wheelchair singles finals on court 3. So that was in response to requests for a larger stadium court to be used for the finals. We had several years prior to that tried it, and it didn't work very well. In the public weren't quite so aware of the matches, and so we stopped doing it, held them on outside courts, and last year moved back. And I think it's fair to say it worked well last year. We had a good crowd for both finals, so that's something that we will repeat this year. Are there any more for any more? If not, thank you all very much indeed for coming. We much appreciate it, and lunch is being served upstairs now. Thank you.